So we've got a fun one today. We've got the Kirkland signature driver. Now this is from Costco, well known for being low cost, high value. These sell out in no time at all when they come in, but we've managed to get our hands on one. How does a sub £200 driver compare to a couple of Verticommerce premium drivers? So top of the range, the G430 Max and the AI Smoke Max. So we're looking at £450, £500 for these versus, let's say 200 is a round number for this. How good is it? How does it compare? Let's take a look. Starting with the G430 Max, I'm using the Mitsubishi the C6 in this. The even flow shaft that's in the Kirkland is not a shaft we can get anymore, so this is as close as possible for weight, trying not to overly influence the performance from the heads. This is really a case of comparing the heads in particular. So I don't want the shaft to be a really low spin, low launch, really high launch. It's a very, very neutral profile, kind of like the even flow. So try to get the head comparison rather than the shaft influence it. So see how we go. So we'll switch to the Callaway now. So we're going to get a mixture of hopefully some good hits, but also some miss hits. That way we can really compare. I think it's the miss hits that are going to be should be the ones that tell us the most. Even though the Kirkland's a less dear product, Costco that own them are a vast, huge company. So they haven't. It's not that they've not spent money on doing it. However, in theory, it's the off-center stuff that should see the bigger difference. So switching over, we've got the Callaway, the AI Smoke Max. So I'm not picking heads which are overly exaggerated in flight. I don't want a low spin knuckleball. I want some neutral mid-launch, mid-spin heads so that we can then get a proper gauge rather than the exaggerated head to test it against. So let's see how the Callaway compares. So that's a good batch with the Callaways. We'll now switch to the Kirkland. So this will be an interesting one. I mean, both the heads that we've hit and this one are 10.5 degree heads, which is higher loft than I use. So with the Callaway and the Ping heads, the flight is on the high side, but that's only relevant to the fact that I use an 8 degree head normally. So we'll see how this compares for flight, but also ball speed, consistency, spin. A few hits with this and we'll on the numbers. So it's first instinct, it's quite a heavily drawbarsed head, so I'm having to work to keep the flight square. It does sit a little bit closed, but actually it's quite a neat, clean frame. I mean, the head itself, it's quite a well balanced head from a shaping point of view, very simple, clean visual. And so it does sit a little bit towed in, and that's not even in the drawbar setting. There's a more drawbar setting than this. So let's see where the numbers are and how it compares. So I've got all the numbers averaged down here, so I haven't taken out any shots. These are the warts and all the shots I've hit there. So some really quite interesting numbers out of it actually. I think there's some really interesting conclusions we can draw from this. And whilst the Costco, the Kirkland driver is a low cost driver, it's not a poor structure of head. So if we're going to compare numbers like for like, okay, as I've hit through the shots, my club speed's increased by a mile an hour and a half. That's just hitting more balls. So if we kind of run through the data from left to right, you're looking at obviously club speed is me. Ball speed wise, it's not a surprise, ball speed and smash factor, it's not a surprise that the ping is slightly higher. It's something that historically has always been known for being consistent, forgiving, stable across the face, so that's really stacked up. but actually ball speed wise, efficiency, smash number, it stacks up very favourably to where the Callaway is. You know, the proportionate ball speeds are very, very similar. And there's one shot when we look at the dispersion patterns you'll see with the Callaway where, okay, there's a bit of a rotter. But actually, you know, looking at these here, you know, the ball speeds and the smash is the real kind of true tell of this. That's the ball speed divided by club speed's efficiency. It's right up there with the Callaway head. So that side, and considering these weren't, I'm just going to pull open the strike pattern here. If we look at, you know, we've got the on screen now the Kirkland, my missus a bit heel side, so they're all out the heel there. We go to the Callaway, they're out the heel or slightly more centered, and similarly with the Ping. You know, all the strikes are that little bit onto the heel side of the head, so it's comparable from a contact point of view. So it's representative for a human on course rather than the robot just hitting it out the middle. So you know, that side it stacks up well. Launch is interesting. It is lower launch. Now, one other factor this, I found this is quite a strongly drawbast head, so I found myself really, you know, fighting the face, but that toe is wanting to turn over. Now, this is, you know, in essence, you know, where are they targeting this head? They're targeting the average player. The average player slices it, hence it's a drawbast head. And that certainly stacks up from a performance point of view. It sits a little closed at address in its standard position, and you can put it in a draw position, which toes it in even more. So it gives that help to someone who's got a right hand miss. So the face is closing a little bit faster than the other two, getting a little more face to path. So path numbers on the screen here, very, very neutral. It's a relief. But the face to path is more shut, so it's producing more of a draw bias than the other two clubs. As a result, the launch angle is slightly lower, but actually that's something with all those shots, the launch angle was consistently quite a strong flight, even on the ones that were a little bit squarer. So it's not as high launch. Now certainly the Callaway head, which we're seeing on screen, the launch number is 3 degrees higher than the Kirkland. It is a high launching head. So I wanted to pick that head just to see how it compared. Obviously the Ping, very, very neutral. That's the 1 degree difference versus 3. So kind of a more, I guess, a more kind of true comparison on launch angle between the Ping and the Kirkland. But certainly if you're looking to bring ball flight down, that Kirkland head's doing that pretty well. The next bit's the spin. So spin, I always look at spin relative to launch angle because that really gives the proportion of spin to launch. So if you're looking for example, you know, the Callaway head, high launch, and the spin hasn't gone up that much. So it's got, you know, 2 degrees difference from the Ping head here in launch angle, but only 120 revolutions on spin. That's actually proportionally a very low difference on spin for that launch angle difference. So looking at where the launch angle and the spin sit to see is it a low launch high spin or high launch low spin to get that kind of high, you know, what is it doing to the pitch of flight and where the spin sits relative to someone's natural ball flight. So what we can see is whilst it is a lower launch, it's a bit lower spin. It's not that different than the Ping, but if we take the comparison of spin to launch from the Callaway, that's noticeably lower spin. So you know, we've got 20%, 25% more launch out of the Callaway shots, but only 10% more spin. So you can see that proportion of spin sits lower than the Kirkland does. So that's the base backspin level. We're also going to look at the consistency of spin. So in that small number underneath the spin totals is the tolerance. So no surprise, the Ping, 130 revs, very, very consistent and stable. That's not a shock. That's what we'd expect out of that head. A little bit more variation out of the Kirkland and the Callaway. Now, the one caveat to the Callaway is that, I'm going to open this up to show you, is that I had one shot that was an absolute disgrace. You know, very, very square delivery, but I heeled it and it's gone high and loads of spin. So that is adding to that total. So you can see 465 revs tolerance top and bottom. I don't want to sugarcoat things, so we'll leave it in for the comparison, but if I take it out, it's down to 267. So actually without that shot, you know, I'm not trying to find that the others perform better than the Kirkland, but if I take that absolute horrific swing out of it, it does actually narrow down by about 40%. So, you know, on balance, we'd have to say, you know, the Kirkland is as consistent on spin as, you know, the most stable head out there. No, but very few are. But again, proportionate to cost, really pretty good. So then looking at, you know, the other elements from distance point of view, averages, because it's a lower flight, for me it's actually creating a slightly stronger trajectory. So distance wise, that's why it averages a little bit more. However, longest shot, I'm going to put this is where we'll look at the dispersion. If I can click the right button. Longest shot, as you can see on screen here, is one of the Pings. But what you will see, whilst the left to right tolerance is quite strong, as in quite wide. That's where it's that heavy drawbar, so that gets away from me a little bit. The top to bottom dispersion is really very good. So actually, it's punching quite high above its weight from a cost point of view to performance. If you're looking for something that's anti-right, lower launch and consistent, it's a pretty darn good head. So we might find ourselves, I'm sure we will find ourselves doing some more comparison videos with the draw biased heads and see where this sits relative to them. But that actually, you can say bar that horrific shot with the Callaway, actually outperforms top to bottom the other two. So that's really quite impressive. So if I go back to the numbers, as we can see, total distance on average being a lower flight a little bit further, carry no more than the others, but then runs out more as a result. And again, swing lines, thankfully from my point of view from the test, the angle of attack's within half a degree, paths within half a degree, just the face to path shows how strong a draw bias the Kirkland is. So if we were to round this up, what would we say? So well, actually, it's a very strong performing head. There are certainly people that will not get a great result out of it. I think if you hit a lower ball, this isn't going to be a club head for you. It's going to knock the flight. It's not helping the flight get up in the air. So I don't see it necessarily being a great ball flight for you unless you play just solely in very windy conditions. If you're a high spin player, again, is this going to be a great head for you? Relative to others that are on the market, not necessarily. But it brings the launch angle down, so that counters that a little bit. But I think overall, what we can look at, this is good. This is not a club that's been made on a really, it's been made on a budget, but it's not been made as just a get it out there for something cheap. It actually does perform pretty well. So overall, for a club that's half the price, if that, less than half the price of the other two, the caveat is if you can get hold of one. Because they are like a certain element of rocking horses. They're really hard to get a hold of because they just sell out like that. And we've struggled with both of the last recent launches to actually get there in time to get one. We've managed to this time. But actually quite impressive. So I think what it does go to show is don't discount it just because it's not expensive relative to the others. This is a big company making a product that they know is going to sell well, and they haven't stripped too much in doing it. So production wise, looks pretty good. It's a nice looking head, very simple, very clean. But overall, yeah, don't discount it just because it's cheap. More expensive isn't always better.